Greetings, this is Sundance, and this particular lesson will be on the relationship of history and prophecy. Some people are gifted or experts in math or science or perhaps the arts. However, when it comes to history, expertise may vary due to what type of history, one's sources, and the perspective. Evangelist and publisher Dwight L. Moody stated that prophecy is history unfulfilled, and history is prophecy fulfilled. Here, we will be briefly discussing 3 modern wars with their outcomes, including a bonus biblical historical story that introduces this topic. One of the earliest known world wars being that of the Mesopotamian War that involved Abraham in Genesis, the 14th chapter. In the beginning of the chapter, there are 4 kings, mainly of Babylonia, and their men against the 5 kings that reside near the land of Canaan. The king of Elam, Chedorlaomer, is the antagonist here as he is subjugating the people of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. The scriptures in Genesis 14:4 reads, 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. The next year, Chedorlaomer and his allies attacked them. Then Chedorlaomer made the mistake of kidnapping Lot, Abraham's nephew, and when Abraham heard this, he gathered 318 men to go into battle. Abraham eventually ends up rescuing Lot and defeating the antagonist Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him in Genesis 14:17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. Again, the side that does the subjugating loses the war. That extra outside force or auxiliary being Abraham's regiment ended up being the difference. In more modern times, when looking back at the American Civil War of the 1860s, the background of this war involves chattel slavery. This is the human subjugation going on during this time in the South, although slavery took place in the North in earlier decades. It's an estimate of millions of Africans who died during either their capture, Middle Passage, or on plantation. This is a war between the Union of the North and the Confederacy of the South. The Northern Union Army ended up winning the war. However, there were over 600,000 casualties in total. Abraham Lincoln later wrote, "Without the military help of black freedmen, the war against the South could not have been won." Most people don't know this fact, but this is another example of auxiliaries. The second war is World War I of the 1910s. This is a war between the central powers of Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire versus the major powers that involved Britain, France, America, and Russia. Before the war, the human subjugation that occurred was the Armenian genocide from 1915 to 1923. Nearly 1.5 million Armenians, who were mostly Christians, died at the hands of the Ottomans. The Ottomans, Germans, Austrians, and rest of the Central Powers lost the war, and their empire was lost as England and France divided up their region. The third war is World War II. Again, Germany, Italy, and Japan are at war with England, America, and the Soviet Union. Before this war, the human subjugation involved the Jews in what is known as the Holocaust by Nazi Germany. Over 6 million people died in the Holocaust that also included other groups of people. The Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan would end up losing the war. And this was the bloodiest war of the 20th century, with over 80 million people dying. I would have to say the Germans' downfall was getting trapped in the Soviet winter. If you notice something in common, it's the side that does the subjugating is the side that ends up losing the war. The Confederacy, Ottomans, and Nazi Germany end up on the losing side. At times, the universe with population balances things out. This leads me to address the current day and someone who I think is gifted in history, and that's Professor Jiang. Notice what he says concerning America and its election along with Iran. This statement is made before the election results of 2024 regarding Trump, America's military, and its attack on Iran.
So in this class, this semester, I'm making three big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is that the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change the global order. So last class, we looked at one reason why the United States would invade Iran, which is the Israel lobby. And in today's class, we'll look at another reason, which is the defense of empire. America is an empire, and it must defend its imperial status. So let's examine what an empire means for America.
Very impressive. Now we will see if he ends up being correct in the end, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I also agree with his statements concerning empire, and I will discuss this on another topic. The current subjugation that has occurred is that of the Palestinians in Gaza. Most of us know that America has attacked Iran on behalf of the nation-state Israel, and we will see how this turns out. Currently, it hasn't resulted in multiple countries getting involved, but some historians know how some of these things can get. Outcomes take years, and sometimes even happen over a decade. Jiang understands empires and their patterns down through history and their rise and fall. Mankind's vices really don't change after all these centuries. This is a glimpse on the history of war and their outcomes from a different perspective. See you on the next one. Take care, friends.